In this video, I'm breaking down training advice from some of the biggest names in fitness with my friend, Dr. Mike Israetel. Mike has a PhD in sports science, is a competitive bodybuilder, and one of YouTube's top fitness educators.
Still agree with that?
Yeah, even more than when I said it.
I have a degree in biochemistry, multiple peer-reviewed papers, and 6 natural bodybuilding competitions under my belt at the national and pro level.
Hey, that's cool. Like, I actually like novel exercises. There's no science on that.
We'll each get about 30 seconds to give our take. No fluff, just straight critique. Now, this isn't about calling anyone out. A lot of these lifters are better bodybuilders than us. They're clearly doing the big things right. Our goal is to break down their advice through a scientific lens and then share the things we'd tweak. Let's get into it.
I want to start with, in my opinion, the greatest bodybuilder of all time, Mr. Ronnie Coleman. So this is a pretty famous clip. You went on Fouad's podcast and made the claim that you think Ronnie would have had better quads and a lower risk of injury had he trained in a more science-based, optimal way. So let's listen.
Fouad, the short answer is they would all have bigger quads with less injuries if they trained more like we're saying. Yes, absolutely yes.
We still agree with that?
Yeah, even more than when I said it. No one has ever looked back at almost anything in history and said, man, that really was an optimized process. Now, a lot of people would have 2 problems with that. One is they assume, the champ is the champ is the champ, and thus they did it right. And they did it right for sure, but there's better degrees of right that could have separated Ronnie Coleman even further from the rest of the pack. And the other one is more of an egotistical, emotional thing. It's one of those like, well, how dare you criticize the person? So taking absolutely nothing away from Ronnie Coleman, yes, he could have been better if he used very commonly accepted, well-understood mechanisms like more scientific approach to training.
I strongly agree with the injury aspect of that. I think one of the probably main reasons that Ronnie got really injured is that he cranked the dials on a lot of different variables. He trained with very high loads, very high intensity, and very high volume. Those 3 things combined is more injurious than just turning up a couple of those variables.
Sure.
So like take Dorian Yates, for example. People say, oh, Ronnie trained so heavy, that's why he got injured. So well, Dorian Yates trained heavy too, but he had lower volume. With he could have had bigger quads point. What do you think of the fact that his genetics get him this much quad growth? Let's just say his supplements get him this much quad growth. The fact that he's training hard at all gets him this much. Now, putting a little more extra optimization on it might give him that much more. I would agree with that. Is that much more going to be noticeable to the human eye?
We don't really know much about Ronnie. Let's assume his maximum recoverable volume under all decent conditions was, let's say, 25 hard sets of quads per week, just making up numbers. Yep. But it turns out that he averaged about 22. And so we could surmise based on a current understanding of volume that if he was 3 sets shy of optimal, so you might have missed out on a few percentage points of growth. But as we've been finding out in the recent literature, if your systemic fatigue is not a limiting factor, potentially for some muscles, 20 and 30 and 40 sets per week for short sprints is even more hypertrophic than numbers less than that. And so there may be a world in which Ronnie's MRV for, let's say, his quads was actually 10 sets higher on average than he ever did. And that means maybe he could have gotten substantially bigger quads, but we just don't know. So there is an option that the reality is more what you describe, and I think that's very likely, but you never can tell. If you integrated some more sports science into this approach and this rerunning of history, you could have gotten radically better growth if you're just like, wow, he really wasn't doing a lot of the stuff correctly that we thought. Usually the answer is just like, then who the fuck are you to talk about Ronnie? Which is dope for bro vibes, but I wouldn't call that thinking.
Sure. Okay, awesome. All right.
Next, I want to look at some different steroid talk from around the industry, and we'll start with none other than a hot take from the Tren twins.
99.9% of people should not take fucking steroids because you don't know what you're doing. You don't have the money for it. It's a waste of money. It's a waste of time because you're not going to stick with it.
I think the most effective way to deter people from taking steroids is actually something that you've been doing, which is highlighting the mental
Taking
impact.
tons of steroids.
Taking tons of steroids, no. Is highlighting the mental impacts. If you're someone who's struggled with anxiety and you know how bad that feels, knowing that that could be exacerbated with steroid use is probably going to be a really strong deterrent for you. The other 2 things that I think are actually quite effective, telling people that it increases acne. People do not want acne. 2, it might make you bald early on, in your 20s even.
Yeah, I have 2 more. One, it can reduce your proximate or even ultimate intelligence level, which is real bad news, especially for developing brains of young people. And the other one is especially if you're under age 22, some kinds of steroids, many kinds, will limit your growth vertically. So if you want to be a tall king versus a short king, probably stay off the sauce.
Speaking of Maddie.
if you got low testosterone, I think you should be on something. If you're a guy and you're walking around with 250 test level, you should be on something. If you're doing it for the benefit to look great, it's the wrong reason to do it. If you're doing it to be healthy, do it.
I think I agree with him that like if you have low testosterone, clinically low testosterone, go to your doctor.
Great point.
Get it checked out, and then if he recommends testosterone replacement therapy, take that. The thing is that TRT is just going to get you in the normal physiological range. You're not going to get huge off of that, right?
Not huge. It can enhance it a little bit.
Probably.
There's a couple different ways. One, a lot of TRT will take you to the top end natural limit, which most people aren't. Another really interesting thing about TRT is if you miss a couple nights of sleep, if you don't get good nutrition, if you're arguing with your girlfriend, your testosterone as a natural will dip because your nuts produce less of it. But if you're doing TRT, it's stable, high levels all the time, which subtly, over time, does expose you to more hypertrophic potential. It's just comical to me that Michael Hearn would say don't do it for appearance, where he's like seemingly a vain who does it for appearance. And listen, I'm the vainest of them all, but at least I deal it straight.
Because there's a lot of people that if they took testosterone or they took a bunch of different steroids, they still would look like shit.
Yeah, sometimes you'd be shocked that if you walk into a public gym, like who's actually on gear and who's not. Sometimes the guys who are natural look better than the guys on gear.
So I think an unintended consequence of videos like the ones I've made, saying that look how effective steroids actually are, is that people think that if they do a cycle, they're gonna look like a professional bodybuilder. And it's like, no, how much steroids work for you is relative to your baseline, and there's a huge genetic range in terms of how people respond to steroids, just like there is a huge genetic range in terms of how people respond to training.
If you're expecting that it's going to transform the hell out of you, 7 or 8 times out of 10, you're going to be wildly wrong, and then you'll get really, really upset, and you'll probably just take more and more and more of them. It'll cause more harm.
All right, let's dig into some training techniques that I put together from fitness influencers and pro bodybuilders. We'll start with Sam Sulek, who just competed in bodybuilding for the first time and won.
I think this is his last 2 or 3 reps here. 5 plates, Smith machine squat. So I thought that was a beautiful set. I would give it like a 9.5 out of 10.
He doesn't need 5 plates to get the job done. He's needlessly exposing his tendons and connective tissues to a high degree of risk. But other than that, I think with the 365 or 405, he could make a really good solid run. This is just great work. Am I a perfectionist asshole with a PhD? Yeah, hell yeah, that's why I say shit like that.
This is a barbell row.
Yeah.
He actually doesn't do a whole lot of reps in his sets. Like he's usually in the about 6 to 8 rep range, and he'll do a couple length and partial.
Which is a fine range.
And that's it. What do you think?
Is this a pretty decent bent over row as far as gym culture is concerned? Yeah, for sure. Could it be better? Yeah, it could be notably better. Just keeping a tighter core, doing less wobbling, potentially getting super low at the bottom and touching the ground, waiting for a second. And then as you come up, coming up with your torso a little bit to improve the angle so you can get a bit of a better peak contraction, not be limited as much by the fact that the movement's much harder at the bottom than the top. I do like his length and partials at the end. I think that's awesome.
Me too. I agree from an optimization standpoint. I can see arguments from both sides. From the cheat side, it allows you to load a little more weight, and then as long as you control that eccentric, it's a little more tension.
Yeah, he's not
negative. He's kind of not, but
and that's already good technique.
Yeah. Okay. Fair. Well, even if you use momentum to get it up and then control it on the way down.
That's very interesting. I think if you're good technique, but you use momentum reps to do the concentric and then really slow the eccentric, I think that could even work better than standard reps. However, from a stimulus to fatigue ratio perspective, I'm not sure if that makes sense because it's going to beat the shit out of you much more. Yeah. Why not just do an extra set of good technique?
All right. Let's look at Cbum trains. So he's doing incline dumbbell press, 140-pound dumbbells.
4, 3, 2, 1. 4, 3, 2, 1. 4, 3, 2, 1.
What do you think?
I think it's great. If I was really nitpicky, I would say instead of putting the dumbbells on his chest, he could take them to outside his chest and get more of a stretch. I also think he could pause for 1 or 2 seconds at the very bottom, get that ultra deep stretch and then go. But like as far as it goes and it looks like this is excellent technique.
For me, again, I actually like training heavier. So I don't always use as slow of a tempo as you would. I probably go about maybe 1 to 2 seconds on the eccentric, but I'm still controlling it. However, when you get as strong as Chris or yourself, like he's already using 140-pound dumbbells. So if he did a negative like me, he might need to use the 180s. And at that point, you don't have those dumbbells, or they're just so big.
It also gets weird to load them on your knees and stuff and load them up here. I mean, you got guys helping you. The whole thing is
That's it. So once you get so big, I just do think that that's a fantastic strategy to use a slower negative. Decline dumbbell skull crushers. I've actually never done those.
I'm not an enormous fan because at the very bottom end where the stretch is applied, the lever arm isn't actually making the exercise as difficult as possible. Now, this is a cool variant to do every now and again, but a straight flat bench will get your upper arm to be completely parallel to the ground at the bottom. And the deeper you go, the higher the force is. I think you can't really beat that at the end of the day. I think for some people, if they hold it what I call double dildo style, they'll get some elbow weirdness. So sometimes I like to do thumbless. And even with dumbbells, I like to treat it as a bar, do like a 45 angle instead of like this. But I think this is awesome.
This back work is interesting. So these are T-bar rows. Notice he pauses in the full squeeze.
Definitely on paper, I would do a stretch over squeeze. He might be doing a variation though, where sometimes, because there's crap loads of little muscles in your back, and sometimes you can really get your scapular retractors to feel really awesome and connect to them if you pause at the squeeze and really do that whole retraction thing. So sometimes people think the goal is overall back hypertrophy, but if the goal is doing some of the mid-back musculature and really squeezing it, sometimes I think, yeah, there may be a place for top pauses.
That makes perfect sense, man. And like I said in the video we did on your channel, like I think you can go overboard with the stretch stuff to the point where you just like completely negate the squeeze altogether. And sometimes the squeeze does help you get that mind muscle connection. And with a muscle like the back, that's not really a muscle, but a web of muscles. Sometimes it matters. Like, are you actually connecting with the muscle that you're trying to on this move? Totally. So yeah, okay, perfectly valid. All right, lean beef patty.
The one and only.
So these are seated hamstring curls, and you can see she's leaning forward over the machine. So I like this technique. I personally do lean forward. For me, that's comfortable. I think for some people, they find they're not as stable when they do this. In which case, I would almost favor stability over the little bit of extra pre-stretch that you get by leaning forward and say lock yourself in and then just push it really hard.
I agree a ton. For me, like it also depends on the machine. Some machines in the seated hamstring curl, I can lean forward and it feels great. Other machines, I'm like, oh, there's like a pole in my chest. I'm like, fuck that. I lean back, I get really a ton of neural drive, I'm comfortable. I can produce a ton of force, activate a lot of musculature. If you, on any given hamstring machine, want to find out what's best for you, just simply do a test. No wrong answers there.
Nice. Okay, this is an interesting one. I think she calls these twerker squats. Oh.
Get your health bar out now.
So she basically does like a little pulse in the hole, so like a half rep and then a full rep.
I love it. I think that's a great way to get more time in that stretch position.
From a powerlifting standpoint, if you're trying to maximize your squat, I'd say to probably stick with the full range of motion reps just because it's a little more specific to what you do in competition. From a bodybuilding standpoint, I think this is great, especially for the glutes and the quads. You're getting them really stretched, spending a lot of time in
Yes, and in powerlifting, if you struggle with that bottom position, you could do these as an assistance exercise after or on another day for squats to get you more work in that bottom position.
Athlean X, these are called Omni crossover.
We call it the Omni crossover. So I set one cable high and one cable low. The one that's low is going to come up and across my body, more effectively targeting the upper chest, and the one that's high is going to be brought from top down across my body to more effectively hit the lower chest.
Seems fine. It seems odd, but also like if you flip the sides enough and you go hard and you go consistently and you track your progression and you go up over time and load, there's nothing bad about it. It looks wacky, but I can't say on principle anything's wrong. It's just, again, it's not going to be the solution to all of life's problems.
Of course not, but it might feel good. I personally, if I'm trying to target upper versus mid versus lower, I do what's called a cable crossover ladder. So you just set up the cables high for your first set, fly downward, set them mid for the second set, set them low for the third set, and that way you can kind of target all three.
What I do is I do months of training dedicated to lower, months dedicated to mid, months to upper, while keeping the other ones on the back burner, and then I can really have months of progression that actually grows the chest where I want.
Such a Mike Israel thing. Jay Cutler 2003 back workout.
No pain for you. Come on. Come on now. Come on. This is what he's known for right here. Big back. Big back. Come on. Come on. No pain. No pain.
Jay looks so phenomenal.
So good.
I really am a Jay Cutler fan.
It's unbelievable how much, just looking at his videos, you can tell how much under control he is. Every rep looks almost identical. I also like the fact that he's doing little mini rest pauses. Like he'll do a couple reps, he'll leave it at the top to the stretch, which also grows more muscle, but then he gets a little bit more breath in him and gets a couple more reps out. I think this is pretty good. If that was nitpicky, I would say it would behoove him to control the weight with a little bit of a slower eccentric on the way up, but I think he's still under control, so I don't have a lot of hate for this at all.
Okay, interesting. Yeah, I mean, I think, again, if I was going to nitpick, I personally like a bit of a closer grip than this.
He's a little bigger than you, though.
True. But my audience is not as big as him either.
Sure.
And I think a lot of people think like, oh, I want to get a wider back height. You want a wider grip?
That's just
I
totally
actually think
wrong.
if anything, it's probably a narrower grip. Correct. And so I would treat this more as like a upper back pull down because he's getting a bit more of a lean back. He's got a wider grip and tons of scapular retraction. So he's getting a massive mid back stimulus out of this. If he wanted to target his lats a little more, or if you were wanted to target their lats a little more, I would say probably actually take a closer grip, a neutral grip, and focus on driving the elbow down with a more upright posture, especially at the top. Get a huge stretch on your lats with a fully upright posture. Sure. And then slightly lean back, maybe 10 to 15 degrees to clear your face. Stop here and then go back up. Totally. But as a mid-back exercise, I think this is fantastic. Yep. Jay Cutler, 405 pounds incline press.
It's really good.
Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, a little bit more eccentric control, a little bit of more of a pause, but this is like 2% critique.
I know.
Flawless execution.
I think a lot of the really big pro bodybuilders have a tendency not to come all the way down to their chest.
Yes.
And he obviously is, which I think is really good. Greg Doucette leg press, being coached by Eric Janicki.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So I don't actually know if this is how Greg would normally do his leg press.
Okay.
Shoulder width, roughly?
About shoulder width, yep.
As low as is comfortable?
That's perfect, yep.
Okay.
So we're gonna go nice, slow, eccentric load. As stretch as you feel comfortable, and then push up to about there. That's perfect. Good, nice control. So breathing, I want nice controlled breathing throughout the rep. Don't try to hold your breath and then explode out. Nice controlled breathing throughout. So slow, eccentric load. Nice big stretch. That's perfect. See how much knee flexion he's getting there?
What do you think?
Pretty good.
Yeah.
I would like to see a combination of more knee and hip flexion, taking his knees and pulling them outside of his chest and getting super low. We can get more glute hypertrophy that way in addition to quad hypertrophy.
So get even deeper?
Correct, much deeper. Yeah, because see, his legs are almost vertical. I would like to see his knees come out and touch his armpits.
And you would do that by just flaring the knees out a little bit. Correct. And almost bringing them to your front delts, I guess. That's it. Wow. Okay. I personally like the low foot position here. I think it'll help him get more knee flexion, more quad stimulus. Absolutely. And I can't quite tell, but I think he is even going a little bit up onto his toes.
Yeah.
That's not something that I do.
Yeah.
Do you do that?
I don't do that.
Yeah.
It sacrifices your ability to really neurally drive through your quads and really recruit tons of high-end motor units because you're unstable.
Yeah.
Anytime you're on your tippy toes, your spinal cord, et cetera, will tell you like, don't produce a ton of force. But that's just another way of doing leg press. It's the sissy squat equivalent of a leg press. It's a valid movement in its own right, but I think heavier work with your heels deeply planted and with your knees coming out is awesome as well, and probably the better way to do it. But this as a variant is totally cool, unless Greg Doucette is doing it.
Fair enough.
Okay, I'll keep this part short, but I want us to respond to a couple people who had criticisms of you and me specifically.
Absolutely hate about today. It's this nuanced bullshit with all these kids that regurgitate everything they watch from Dr. Mike to Jeff Nippard to everything out there. And I love those guys and they put out a lot of good stuff. But for Christ's sake, can we just look and say, you should get back to just being consistent with training hard,
right,
doing the basics, mastering the basics, and then going from there.
Agree or disagree?
Pretty wise. You know, if you're doing something because you've been compelled by the evidence or by the person explaining it, that it's a wise thing to try to put into your already sound plan. Dr. Mike drops a little bullshit. Jeff Nippard drops a little bullshit. Well, I can put that in. You can rationalize it. You understand why it's working. I think it's awesome. Also, if you're experimenting and trying some stuff, great. But if you like changing your plan every 2 weeks because the new influencer of the week said do this, yeah, it's a bad deal. And I think that's what's being addressed here.
What annoys me a little bit is when the influencer of the week who does the new cool exercise gets labeled as science-based, so it gets lumped in with science-based training. And it's like, hey, that's cool. Like, I actually like novel exercises. There's no science on that. No. People don't realize there's not one single long-term study on the back. Right. Everything that we say about back training is an indirect application of biomechanics, anatomy, other
inference. Just looking for the thing is already a bad start. Get the basics going, and then everything is an interesting strategy to try out. But if you think like you've got zero back growth from pull downs and pull-ups, all of a sudden that one arm lat thing is just going to be the solution to all of your problems. It could be marginally better and it could be awesome, but it's like the thing, like, man, that's probably not true.
Here's the thing people need to realize too. Exercise selection in and of itself is a relatively minor variable. Like really important variables are effort, how close you are to failure, how much volume you're doing, and I would argue like your technique with your range of motion and like control and those sorts of things. Like
frequency.
Most exercises, like common exercises that people do are effective.
Yeah.
And so it's like, try out different ones, see what works best for you, you know?
You just got to look at any actual athletes. That's who you should really look for to see what works and what doesn't. You get what I'm saying? And how do they get bigger for the most part? They train like heavier and harder. You know what I'm saying? I'm not saying you have to go heavy to get big, but it kind of goes hand in hand. Like if you freaking get stronger, you're going to get bigger. There's no two ways about it, man.
Agree or disagree?
I don't even know what the claim is, to be honest. Because it's really a thinking person or a guy who yells a lot.
It's a vibe. It's definitely a vibe.
Guy or vibe.
I think he's really funny. I think he's really funny.
Okay.
But like, I mean, it's kind of insane. Like if you go to a varsity gym and look at how athletes train, it's usually pretty bad.
Yeah.
Like not good range of motion and bad part of range of motion and like lots of really bad technique. And
most athletes try to get out of lifting altogether if they can.
Yeah. But I kind of like, I feel like I sort of agree with him that like, yeah, training hard, training heavy. I think it's not a coincidence that most of the best natural bodybuilders are also very strong. Now that could be a chicken or egg situation.
I don't think it's a chicken and the egg situation.
No,
I think they're strong because they're big. Because cross-sectional area makes you stronger. Getting stronger doesn't make you bigger because getting stronger without getting bigger enhances the neural efficiency in effect. It lets you lift more weight, but lifting more weight doesn't necessarily make you bigger. And there's tons of bodybuilders that have gotten insanely jacked, like Jay Cutler, doing sets of 10 to 15 on average and have never really done much in the 5 to 10 range and even lower. Yeah, getting stronger is dope, but getting stronger at the hypertrophy volumes and getting close to failure is the best way to get bigger.
I actually do think that causality goes the way you said, but as you get bigger, you get stronger. Therefore, the weight that you were using is no longer stimulative enough. So you have to add a little more weight. So it's like you almost do have to get stronger to keep getting bigger.
You have to put more weight on the bar to keep your reps at least under 30.
Yeah. Okay, we're gonna switch over to some hype stuff.
Okay.
All right?
Well, a lot of people say, okay, do I need to get into an ice bath? No, you need to get uncomfortably cold for 11 minutes a week. That could be done with a cold shower. That could be done by getting into an ice bath. That could be done by getting into the ocean. That could be done by getting into a lake. That could be, it is not important how you get cold. You could even put ice packs on your neck or in your whatever, in your pants.
Just get cold.
People do that.
I know that people like the cold thing because it's difficult and it's kind of shocking and it gets their their sympathetic going, and you get a parasympathetic rebound after, which means you're super, super relaxed, which is awesome. There's also something that Huberman talks about all the time, which I think is super valid, which is like expose yourself to difficult things and makes the rest easier. My retort to that is like just train hard, because when you're training hard, not only are you experiencing psychological difficulty, like getting all those benefits, but you're also like making yourself way healthier, body composition changes, aesthetic changes, gym culture, vibes. You get none of the rest of those things from cold tub exposure. I'm interested in the idea that there may be these notable benefits from chronic cold exposure, equalized for all of the variables. I just haven't seen the convincing literature to show that that's the case. And it might be true. I wouldn't put a lot of money into it currently myself.
Yeah, I might be a little more critical than that. I feel like cold stuff is one of the most overhyped things in fitness right now.
I agree with that also.
And tons of people do it, and the evidence is just so scant.
Sure.
If it allows you to be more motivated and, be more productive throughout your day, then like that's great. But like I feel like I'm not necessarily saying Huberman is doing this, but like a lot of influencers market it as though it's like the key to success, just broadly speaking. Sure. And it's just crazy.
Sure.
If you enjoy it, go for it. But I think a lot of people suffer through it because they think they have to. I did a video calculating how many extra calories you burn in an ice bath, and it's like 10. Yes. You'd literally be better off just walking in place rather than getting in the cold bath.
Like a minute.
And from recovery, there's new evidence showing that hot exposure, so like a hot bath, seems to be better than a cold bath after a workout. Again, if it helps you be more productive, go for it. But if you hate it, then like you really don't need to do it. This is an interesting nutrition claim.
This is not a calorie thing. The belief in the calorie myth creates enormous human suffering. And it's not accurate that you've said and I've said. Hunger is what matters. And telling people that they should not eat because of calories, it's like telling people don't have sex. Like, how well has that worked in teenagers?
Strained analogy. But there's some wisdom there. I will say, to sort of steelman this position. Hunger signaling is the absolute core genesis of obesity and the reason people are out of control with their body weight. If they consistently eat fewer calories, they'll lose all the weight you want. I mean, it's shown in science. There's a reason people die of starvation. Low calories don't just make you gain weight. The thing is, they won't. They'll get super hungry and then they'll go to McDonald's and they'll make up for it. So yeah, there's a really good claim in here. But the whole calorie myth is just not a myth. It's just scientific fact. Keto and hunger management and all this stuff can work with calorie balance. You don't have to have one or the other.
Yeah, exactly. The reason why hunger is so important is because it can determine caloric balance. Weird. Like, that is the fundamental thing.
3 servings of Chex. I was actually kind of disappointed. I was scanning around the kitchen. I was looking for a box of Golden Grams that used to be floating around in here. Somebody must have finished them off, but you know, whatever.
Do you think that eating cereal like this in the off season is okay, or is this a bad idea?
If you don't have hunger signaling problems, eating it pre-contest is totally fine too. This is just not something I'm really willing to debate much anymore because it's just completely crystal clear that if their macros are sorted, if your sodium intake is under control, the food sources really just don't matter much.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I think that when it comes to body composition, it really does come down to the calories and the macros almost entirely. If you are very, very, very restrictive with your diet to the point that you're developing nutrient deficiencies, and like I think that can probably do some like hormonal suppression and be suboptimal, but you have to eat really bad. Like just add some vegetables with this, and I really think it's probably...
Almost all cereals in the United States are fortified, and they have tons and tons of vitamins and minerals, so cereal, even breakfast cereal, is really nutritive.
Fair enough. I want you to rate this bench press.
Gorgeous, 10 out of 10. I respect the out of the art. It's just super impressive. I respect the rule book. I know on vibes it doesn't look cool, but rules are rules. And so recently some of the federations modified the rules for elbow bend and stuff.
Exactly.
And so now that
this wouldn't be legal in IPL.
Correct. But when and if legal, I think it's a work of art.
To be fair, I do think this looks ridiculous, and I do approve of the new rule changes.
Agreed.
I actually do.
Agreed,
but,
for sure.
I mean, if you're playing within the rules, then like this is...
Then you got to do what you got to do.
Yes. Have you ever seen this? Reverse press.
Holy shit. That guy's mobility is next level. Color me impressed, man. Also, in the bedroom, he could do all kinds of crazy things, I'm sure, with multiple people.
So here's the thing, right? I was thinking about this. He is doing scapular retraction here. So he's training his back, but he's also training his triceps.
And tricep day, flipping the script. Someone's like, hey, you doing push or pull? He's like, aha.
What are you even doing here? Your kind doesn't even belong in the gym.
Hey man, I saw what happened there, and I just wanted to let you know that I was just like you. This is me, and I felt I never belong in the gym because of people like that. So don't get discouraged, because it does get better.
Thanks, man.
Looks like grooming to me. Is he wearing a Pokemon outfit?
He is, yeah. So he comes in and a guy is like, hey, you don't belong here in the gym, man. And then, you know, Noel comes over and is like, you know what, man? I was in a beginning place like you, and I just want to say it gets better and you belong here too. I think it's nice. I think
it's super wholesome. It's super nice. I love the inclusivity and the welcoming everyone. That's dope. And I think that most big guys absolutely exude that vibe. My wife took one of her friends to the gym recently, and the friend is someone who had been overweight for some time and is now getting leaner. But like all the compliments that she got, she'd never been to hardcore gym. She was just a Planet Fitness. At Planet Fitness, nobody really talks to her or looks in her direction. Some people kind of mean mug her. She went to hardcore gym here in Vegas, and like multiple big dudes were like, you're doing great, you're amazing. And she was like, oh my God, these people are nice. And it's like, they are almost.
You're probably right that like most big guys are inviting of people who come to the gym, but you still do see the stuff about like, oh, it's New Year's resolution time. Like the gym's going to be packed with a bunch of newbies, and a lot of people don't like that.
Sure.
And it's like, especially if you are new to the gym and you don't have a muscular physique, or if you're really overweight. And it's like, but then those people will shit on those people for having bad physique or being overweight. It's like, you want them to change their lives or not?
You're jacked already. You don't need to be here anymore. Let the overweight people come to the gym.
Right? Exactly. Yeah. Okay. That's all I got, man. What do you think?
I love it. This is awesome.
Yeah. All right. Thanks so much for doing it. I really appreciate it, Mike.
Huge.
You guys know where to find Mike. I'll put a link to his channel here. Make sure you go and subscribe. He puts out fantastic content, and he does reaction content like this all the time. I absolutely love those videos. If you enjoyed the video, don't forget to leave us a thumbs up. Subscribe to this channel if you haven't already, and I'll see you guys all here in the next one.